everybody and welcome to another Puppy School Q&A. My name's Nicole Harris and I'm a puppy school tutor based on the Hampshire and Surrey border where I've been running classes for the last 10 years. My job today is to talk about the topics of house training and just generally puppy toileting issues. So this tends to be the topic I get asked. It's definitely in the top 3 in terms of questions I get asked from new puppy owners when they first brought their puppy home, just because nobody wants a puppy that's toileting in the house and ruining the carpets and rugs and things. So it's definitely something that we want to get cracking with straight away. So thank you to everybody who's posted any questions at all. I'm going to go through those straight away and answer as best I can, giving you some hints and tips, along with some particular areas I tend to find with house training it can sometimes go a little bit awry, so I've got some extra little hints and tips for everybody as well. So I'll get straight into it, and if you've got any other questions, please do feel free to pop your questions in the comments below. So the first little area I wanted to talk about was just about cleaning up toileting incidents appropriately. When puppies toilet indoors, obviously it sometimes soaks into the carpet, soaks onto the flooring. And we want to make sure that we're cleaning that as best we can. If we can smell urine, then puppies can definitely smell it. But if we can't smell it, puppies probably still can smell it. Their sense of smell is incredible. So we want to make sure that they can't smell that scent, because that's going to encourage them to go back and to toilet on the same area again. So to make sure that we're getting rid of that scent, we need to clean it with an appropriate product. Now, the problem with a lot of household cleaners is that they contain ammonia. And what that does is that actually smells a little bit like urine. So for a puppy, it can just encourage them to toilet back on the area again. So the best products to use are enzymatic cleaners. So what that means is it's going to contain enzymes that are going to break down the organic components of the urine and make sure that we're getting rid of the components that are going to encourage puppies to go back and toilet in the same area again. So that's my first tip, is to make sure that you are not using household cleaners, particularly cleaners that are ammonia based, and that you're using something that is going to properly clean the area. So you can buy products from sort of pet shops and things like that. You can make your own using things like biological washing powder mixed with water and then going over the area with surgical spirit. But I tend to find it's just easier to buy something from the shops, but just making sure that it's going to contain that or have the ability to actually break those enzymes down and break the urine down. So that's the first thing, because no matter how good you are with your house training, unfortunately, there are always going to be accidents, even if they're only few and far between. So we do want to make sure that we're cleaning those properly. So thank you to Diana for pointing that out. And actually, poor Diana got stuck with a product that has the opposite effect. So you can actually buy these sprays that contain scent to encourage a puppy to toilet. So that's unfortunately what she was using, thinking it was the opposite, and it was a spray that was going to clean the area. So that could be quite helpful to spray in the garden, perhaps, to encourage a puppy to want to toilet in the garden. I've never used these products before, so I don't know how effective they are. But yeah, you definitely don't want to confuse those two products. So thank you, Diana, for your little comment there. That was a really helpful one to start us off with. So we had another little question from somebody via private message. So this is actually a puppy who is now 11 months old, Bertie, and the owner suggests that he's a very sociable little fellow, doesn't bark very much at all, so he doesn't really know how to tell us that he wants to go out. It's up to us to take him out regularly when we are at home, which is brilliant. Definitely something that you want to be doing, taking them out regularly if they're not sort of choosing to go on their own. If we don't spot him stood by the patio door or back door, he will quite happily pee against the door. If we catch him, we say, "No, Bertie," in a very controlled way. If we don't spot him, we just clear it up, but keep a very straight face with him. We work, but one of the owners comes home at midday and takes him out, and they're both home at weekends. They have invested in some bells to hang on the door, but he doesn't ring them, he just touches them. So they're not really sure if he's too old to train. Help. So there's quite a lot going on there. So I want to kind of break that down a little bit. So the first thing is obviously when we're talking about house training issues with older dogs, we definitely want to make sure that it is definitely a house training issue. So you don't mention whether he's ever been clean. If he had been clean for a period of time and then he's reverted back to soiling in the house, then with any dog where we get a relapse, it's always worth a little vet check just to make sure there's nothing going on that could be causing that, that medically could be causing that. So that's the first thing I just wanted to mention, is just we want to make sure that there's nothing going on sort of physically that could be causing that. However, I suspect from the way you've said this that it's just an ongoing house training issue. So the thing with puppies is that there's kind of 3 sections to learning how to become house trained. The first is that they actually have to learn where they have to go, so the location that they have to toilet. So for most of us, that's teaching them to go outside in the garden. And that's the first little thing they have to learn. The next thing they have to learn is that when they feel that sensation that they need to go to the toilet, that they need to hold on to that toileting, that they don't toilet inside. And that can take a little bit of time. Obviously, very, very young puppies, they don't have that ability, that muscular control to hold on. So even if you've got a very young puppy who knows to toilet outside, if they don't have that physical ability to hold on to onto it, that you will still get accidents inside. But what you often find is once a puppy knows that they're supposed to toilet outside, when they feel that sensation that they need to go, they will start to take themselves off towards sort of the back door or something like that. And that's a good indication that they need to go to the toilet. The final part of the house training, which is obviously where it sounds like it's going a little bit awry here, is the asking to go out. Now, your puppy, or your Bertie, the 11-month-old puppy here, is actually asking to go out, but the way he's asking is by just standing at the door, which isn't very helpful if obviously you're not around to see it, like you're saying. So I love the idea of getting bells. I think they're a really, really good way of teaching puppies to ask to go out if you've got a puppy that's not barking. This might be a little bit too difficult to go into on this video, but it might be that you just need someone to help you teach Bertie how to ring those bells. So it's not something he's going to do naturally. He needs to understand that ring the bell means that the door is going to open. He has to learn that sequence, that consequence to his actions. So when he rings the bell, the door opens, and that's going to give him access to the outside. Now, it might be that you just need someone to help you teach that to him so that he can then start to ring the bells, and then you can let him out. And that's a really good way to do that. The only thing with that is I sometimes find with some of these dogs, when we've got bells, that what they learn is if I ring the bell, I get to go outside. So what can happen is we end up with a dog that just when they want to go out for a little bit of a sniff, or when they want to go out for a little bit of a play, they'll ring the bell, owner will open the door, they'll go out, go, yay, I'm having a great time, and they don't actually need the toilet. So just be mindful that he might start to use it just as a way of saying, I want to go outside, as opposed to, I need the loo. But that's not necessarily the biggest problem in the world. And it might get around your issue of him not barking to let you know. Now, one of the things that you don't mention here is whether he's toileting during the day. So obviously if you're out all day and obviously one of you's coming home at lunchtime to let him out, there's probably I suspect a period of about 4 hours where he's being left. So for younger dogs, and obviously this might not be applicable to you because you've got an older puppy, but for younger puppies, it is important to realise that a lot of puppies, they just can't hold for that long. So you will get toileting accidents if they're being left for more than maybe a couple of hours. So when they're very, very little, it is important to give them plenty of opportunity to get out on a regular basis so that they can be outside to toilet. What tends to happen when puppies toilet is the actual sensation of toileting itself, of relieving themselves of that tension on their bladder, is very, very, very sort of reinforcing for them. It feels good to them. So what happens is when they toilet outside, they feel really good, and that reinforces the behaviour of toileting outside. If they happen to toilet inside, unfortunately, they relieve themselves and they go, oh, I feel much better now. And it actually reinforces the behaviour of toileting inside. So when you're house training a puppy, this is why it's so important. And this is why I'm saying, it's really good that you're taking him out regularly when you're home. it's really important to make sure that they are getting plenty of opportunity to toilet outside, because every time they toilet indoors, it's kind of reinforcing that behaviour and making it more likely to happen again in the future. So particularly with very, very young puppies, it's really important to make sure that you're able to get them out regularly, whether that's you're at home with them, or whether that is you've got someone who can come in on a regular basis, so maybe a dog sitter or one of the, pet sitter or something like that, to give you a hand with that side of things. So yeah, definitely regular access to outside. But with Mr. Bertie, it does sound like once you've got him learning that ringing the bell means that the door opens, hopefully you should be able to crack that. And it's just a question of whether he's able to hold himself the whole time while you're out or not, which isn't particularly clear from your message. But if you've got a puppy school tutor near to you, then definitely get in touch with them and they should be able to give you a hand with that. There was one other thing that I just wanted to pick up actually from that little message from Bertie's owner, is that you mentioned that when you spot that when he's toileted and you haven't caught him doing it, you tend to just keep a very straight face and just clear it up, which is absolutely the right thing to do. If puppies toilet indoors, it's one of those things we definitely don't want to, after the fact, come in and tell them off, because puppies aren't very good at making associations with things that have happened in the past. Puppies, or dogs in general, they live in the here and now. So it's really important that we don't tell them off for anything that's happened in the past. But actually, it's also quite important with house training not to tell them off if they do toilet indoors anyway, even if you catch them in the act. And the reason for that is there are some puppies that when they get told off, if they find it a little bit sort of scary and a little bit unnerving, what they might learn from that is, toileting when you're around is actually quite a negative experience. So what can happen is you end up with a puppy that says, do you know what, I'm just not going to toilet when you're around, and they'll toilet somewhere where you won't be able to see them. And that can have big implications on house training as well, because we end up with a puppy that just says, I don't want to toilet when you're around, I'm going to go and hide myself. So we get puppies that sort of sneak off into another room or hide behind a sofa to do it, or you'll take them outside in the garden and then they won't toilet the whole time you're there, and then you come back in and then you go off to do your own thing and they go, oh, thank goodness, now I can toilet. So that's just another little hint and tip I've got, which is just trying to avoid telling puppies off for toileting, because if they're toileting indoors, it's not that they're being naughty, it's just that they haven't understood yet what's being asked of them, or they just haven't been able to hold themselves for long enough. So that's my other little tip for you. So we've had another question from a lady with a 5-month-old miniature Dachshund puppy who she says is very variable with toileting. She says when we're on a walk, she will more often than not use the opportunity to toilet, which is brilliant. However, if we're letting her outside just to use the toilet, as soon as we return inside, she'll wee or poo on the floor. Any tips on how to stop this, please? We still have puppy pads down, but she won't use them or will toilet next to them at times. So again, a few little things to go through there. So I'll try and go through them one by one. So the first thing is that it's fantastic that she's toileting out on a walk. Puppies, they need to feel confident to toilet. That's the most important thing. They need to feel comfortable and relaxed to go to the toilet. So the fact that she's doing that out on a walk is actually really good. Quite often I find we have the opposite problem, which is we have puppies that will toilet in the garden where they feel safe and secure, but they won't toilet out on a walk because they don't quite feel relaxed enough yet. And that's something that comes with time. Now you've got the opposite problem, which is a puppy that's toileting on the walk but not toileting in the garden. So what we need to do is look at, well, why is it that she doesn't, well, might be that she doesn't want to toilet in the garden. There's a few reasons why that might happen. So I'd need a little bit more information to know exactly what was going on there. So I'm just going to go through where I typically find the most common reasons that puppies will not toilet in the garden, then they'll come in and they'll do it straight away. So the first one is if we've got a puppy that is a little bit worried in the garden. So that might be that maybe if you've got dogs, neighbourhood dogs that bark when puppy's in the garden, they just don't feel particularly relaxed. My puppy, when she was little, we had a neighbour who used to sort of poke his head over the fence and to say hello, and that spooked my puppy a little bit. So my puppy turned around and said, do you know what, I don't actually feel particularly safe in my garden. And that made her not want to toilet in the garden. Or it could be, has something happened out there that spooked her maybe. So we've had fireworks recently. I don't know, where maybe did we have fireworks happen when she was out in the garden, and she just says, oh no, there was a big loud noise, it was a bit scary, now I don't want to toilet in the garden. So that can sometimes mean that a puppy will go out to the garden, they have their opportunity to toilet, they just say, oh no, I can't possibly do it. They come back in, and then once they're back inside and they feel safe, they then go, oh, thank goodness, and they relieve themselves. So it could be that. Some puppies, I find, they go out into the garden, and because going out into the garden is like the best thing, they get all their games out there, they run around, they have a brilliant time, leaves, stones to chase, whatever it might be. So they go out into the garden, they have a brilliant time, and they just kind of forget that they need the loo. And then it's not until they come back indoors that they suddenly go, oh yeah, I needed to go to the toilet, and that's when it happens. So it's just having a little think, is that what's going on? And if that's the case, what I sometimes suggest to people is it can be helpful to take puppy out on a little lead and just quietly walk around with them, just encouraging them to sort of sniff and gently wander around, because that's more likely to get them to toilet than sort of rushing around and running around and doing their own thing. Going back to if it's a puppy that's a little bit worried, it's just a question of building their confidence out in the garden. So being out there with them, you don't actually mention in your post whether you go out with her in the garden, and that's quite important for puppies that are a little bit unsure. They tend to need their security blanket with them, and if that's what you provide for them, a little bit of security, then they do need you to go out there with them as well. It also means that you can see if they're toileting, so that's quite important for toilet training as well, being there to observe it and making sure it's happening. So the other thing that I would be thinking about is, so I talked about it earlier, has she ever been told off for toileting? Like I say, it's one of those things where, if, you know, it is really frustrating when puppies do toilet, and the temptation is to, oh goodness me, why have you done that? If you can avoid it, like I say, if we've got a very sensitive puppy, what can happen is they start to learn not to toilet in front of you. So that can, if you are going out into the garden with her and she's wandering around and she's not toileting, but then you're coming back in and then you're sort of leaving her to it, she could then be going, oh, okay, now I feel like I can toilet. So again, if we are sort of telling her off at any point, probably making sure that we're sort of not doing that, and making her feel sort of nice and relaxed, so that she wants to toilet in front of you and she doesn't feel worried about doing that. The other thing that it could be is a substrate preference. So what I mean by that is, puppies, when they're young, they develop a preference for the sort of the flooring that they will toilet on, and that will often be very similar to whatever they're used to when they were with their mum and with their litter mates. So if, for example, you have hard floors, so patio outside, but then you've got carpet indoors, and your puppy would prefer to toilet on something soft, it might be that you're going out into the garden, giving her an opportunity to toilet. She's saying, oh, I can't toilet on this floor. I don't feel comfortable toileting on this floor. We come back indoors, and then all of a sudden we go, oh, okay, this feels a little bit better. I feel like I can toilet on this flooring. That's quite a common one. And the other one I get is, if we've got puppies that are used to, or if you've got puppies that like toileting on a hard surface. I had a puppy recently, actually, where the flooring outside and the flooring indoors was quite similar, sort of like a slate kitchen floor, very similar to the patio. So the puppy was finding it very difficult to distinguish between the two. So that's another thing to just consider, is what kind of sort of flooring do they prefer to toilet on, and can we provide that for them? So if it's soft, then making sure that we're taking them to a grassy area. If they prefer a hard floor, which I tend to find most puppies would prefer a soft floor, but some puppies do go for a harder floor, then if that's the case, then finding something like a bit of patio or something like that for them. So there's a few little things there that could be going on. It's obviously difficult to know without asking a little bit more information from you, but hopefully that will give you some things to think about. And obviously do feel free to ask any further questions if you want to. You also mentioned about puppy pads, and I think Lauren mentioned this in a previous video, but I'm going to go through it again. So puppy pads are great if you have a puppy that has been taught to use them. So they're not something that naturally a puppy will necessarily gravitate towards. They're not sort of magic thing that you put down and a puppy goes, oh, that's a toilet. They do need to be taught to use them. Now, my excuse me, my personal opinion has always been, if you've got a brand new puppy and they don't have a toileting location, to give yourself the easiest job, it's easier to teach them to just toilet in one location. And to be honest, if your eventual aim is to teach them to toilet outside, then I would focus all my energies on teaching them to toilet outside and not indoors on a puppy pad. Puppy pads are great if you're having to leave them for long periods of time, because then at least they have somewhere indoors that is appropriate for them to toilet. But in the vast majority of cases, if you can teach your puppy to toilet outside and focus your energies on that, it's far better to do that than to have puppy pads around the house. From what you're saying here, you say we still have puppy pads down, but she won't use them. It does sound like your puppy doesn't realise that a puppy pad is a toileting area, so having them down actually isn't benefiting you in any way. So it's probably better just to pick them up and not to have them. If she was using them, I would be saying absolutely keep them down, maybe at the times when you can't be around to monitor her and supervise her, so maybe if you're going out for longer periods of time. But if you've got a puppy that's not using them, then really there's no point in keeping them. They tend to they just make a mess. And I tend to find a lot of puppies just like to play with them. They just want to rip them up and have fun with them. So yeah, it might be that the puppy pads are just worth doing away with now. I think that was everything that I wanted to go through. If you can think of anything else, or if you've got any other questions, please do throw them at me. But other than that, thank you very, very much. Do feel free to share and like the video and tell us if it was useful or not. And if you've got any other suggestions for topics that you'd really like to hear about, that would be really helpful as well. So thank you very much.